There's research to show that if we have our high fiber food items first and then our starchy carbs later, that might be the best way to do it. It helps to decrease blood glucose levels and decrease blood insulin levels when we do it in that order.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
Hey, Hadar, how's it going? You know, I've been thinking a lot about how we put foods together and if it's a smart way to do things. You know, like wine and cheese. Let's see, beer and popcorn,
burger and fries.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's been on my mind. What about you?
I don't know. I mean, let's be honest. Food is always on my mind. So, that's my favorite topic and my favorite activity, just my favorite all around thing to do for sure is looking at food, eating food, cooking together with others. It's a lot of fun. I like cooking with my family, feeding my family, but more than anything, I like to eat. And I like to talk about nutrition with my patients, which is something new to me, I must say, because we don't get a lot of that training in medical school. So as I'm exploring this field of nutrition and more practical nutrition, I find myself getting to some dead ends where I'm thinking, this sounds great in theory, but how do we really apply it in practice? So I think some of our practitioners who have been following us for a long time now kind of get to that point as well. And I'm wondering if we could give them some help. What do you think?
I think so. And I think what we need is experience. And we have that here. We have Dr. Jessica Maloh, who is a naturopathic doctor, and she practices clinically at Zen Dermatology, and she sees patients that have dermatological concerns, but she does a lot of weight management things too. So welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
That's great. Just the person we need. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, well, I wanted to kick it off by starting to say, when it comes to nutrition, OMG is probably the best abbreviation I can say, right, from residency. I mean, Hadar, what were you taught? I was taught that food had no role. I mean, it's like almost comical when I say this now. Had no role in dermatological conditions. But, I mean, were you taught anything different?
Yeah, but I think we've evolved since, and I think we have a lot of different studies that are coming out and data that is hopefully will help us change the way we practice. Jessica, how do you incorporate these things into your practice? Because you see patients with dermatological complaints every day, right?
Yes, so I think nutrition is a really important topic for patients to discuss because every single day we have to make decisions about what we're going to eat. And so these can all be opportunities to help our bodies or to help reach our goals that we have in regards to our health. One place I like to start is by telling patients more about the things that they can add into their diet, they could have more of, because I think oftentimes they might come to a naturopathic doctor expecting to hear about certain restrictions or things to
Thank you.
Yes, I know, right?
Yes.
This is like, we're always talking about what to take away. What do we put in? How do we act?
Exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you are speaking my gospel. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I think a really important thing to talk about adding more of is fiber. We know fiber is really important. It's going to be the food for our microbiome. It's going to be helpful for our digestive health as well, because when different bacteria in our microbiome are able to feed off of fiber, their metabolites include things like short-chain fatty acids, and these have been found to support intestinal barrier integrity. We know fiber can help with regular bowel movements, glycemic control, lowering cholesterol, and also what are the main sources of fiber? It's fruits and vegetables. And we know that these are sources of phytochemicals that have powerful antioxidants, as well as vitamins and minerals. So I think fiber is a really great thing to focus on with a lot of patients. And on average, it's recommended for women to have about 25 grams of fiber a day, for men about 38 grams of fiber a day. But some research suggests that the average American is only consuming about 15 grams of fiber a day. So there's definitely a lot of room that we can work with. And interestingly, there's some research to show, especially maybe in patients who have type 2 diabetes, that having fiber levels up to 50 grams might even be better for managing our blood glucose levels and blood insulin levels. And so that's a great starting point to ask patients about maybe what their last 24 hours nutrition wise look like, and maybe gauging how much fiber they're currently getting in and speaking to them about all the benefits of having more fiber in their diet.
I love that you brought up the issue with fiber and that study in diabetes, because that was in the New England Journal. I think it was in early 2000s, actually. It's been around for almost 20 years. But they compared it against a standard American Diabetes Association diet. It wasn't just like the standard American diet. They actually compared it against the diet that was supposed to be intended for people with diabetes. And then they gave people a high fiber diet on top of it, right? And if I remember correctly, there were simple little changes that they made, which brings me to my next question. What does it mean to take 25 grams of fiber or 50 grams of fiber? Are people going to be having to put Metamucil into their veins? Because I think that's what a lot of people think fiber is like, just chalking it up and putting it into water and chugging it down. But I'm guessing you have a more palatable way of doing this.
Absolutely. And the amount that they were working with, so the American Diabetes Association's recommendations are 24 grams of fiber per day, and this high fiber diet in the New England Journal of Medicine article was 50 grams per day. And the changes they made between each group wasn't too different or too overwhelming. So, for example, those following the ADA recommendations would have orange juice, whereas those following the high fiber diet would have orange sections. And both were still allowed to have pasta, so that's great news, except the ones that were aiming to have the 50 grams per day, they also had a side dish of zucchini for more fiber in there. And so it's these small changes that we make that can really go a long way.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's not a bad idea to give some examples of foods that are high in fiber, because one of the things I find, depending on where you work, but in general, there's a lot of food deserts around the US. And I'm not even getting into that. I think we just forgot. We're so used to going and eating the same old same, beef, chicken, eggs, pasta, rice, potatoes. And that's it. And then we say something green. There's two things. Well, three. There's the lettuce, there's the broccoli, and the green beans. And that's it. And those are the three greens. And if you don't like them, you're stuck. But there's so much more. Can you give us some examples of foods we haven't thought about in a long time, but are right there in the grocery stores and they are high in fiber?
Absolutely. And so maybe just to gauge a little bit of quantity and how much relative fiber, I'll give a few examples as well. And so something like 1 cup of kale is 2 grams. And so keeping in mind that the recommendations for women are 25 and for men 38. So 2 grams from 1 cup of kale. Half a cup of chickpeas could be 5 grams of fiber. But if you want a list of maybe some of the highest fiber sources, when we look at certain vegetables, jicama is a great one. So 1 cup of jicama has 6 grams of fiber. It makes a great snack. I like to purchase it all the time. And at Trader Joe's, they actually have jicama that's sliced. And so there are these jicama sticks, really easy to take to work, or if you're at home, just want to have something to munch on, great option there. Artichokes are another really great source of fiber when we're looking into different seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. And these are things that could be easy to include in some of our meals. So easy to sprinkle onto a salad or with our oatmeal in the morning, also a great source of fiber. Things like navy beans, white beans, and pumpernickel bread. And these could be very quick and easy to have during the day. So maybe switching out the toast that we're using in a sandwich to something that has a little bit more fiber. And again, all these small, subtle changes could really add up to make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Here are my favorite. Ready? There's a vegetable called kohlrabi. It was huge when I grew up as a kid in Israel. It was everywhere. My mom used to put it in the soup every time. We used to eat it just like that, and then I completely forgot about it. Rediscover it. Now that's a fiber bomb. I don't
Yeah.
know the numbers, but I'm pretty sure last time I checked, it had a lot of it. Also, cauliflower,
Mhm.
really great source of fiber. So all these great stuff that's just around us all the time. And, I like once you discover your palate kind of gets used to these flavors, the other processed food really doesn't taste as much. You just start tasting the salt and oil in them. And my palate kind of moves away from that. And now I just eat these vegetables raw. And even that is good. But we're not going to hurry up there. Tell us, because I think that's important to
Well,
prepare.
Hadar, actually,
Yeah.
can I pause and just give you props for that, what you just said? Because I feel like, eating right shouldn't be a diet. It's got to be a lifestyle. And I know, Jessica, you talk about this all the time. It's not like some short term thing. You want it to be long term. By the way, kohlrabi, 1 cup of kohlrabi has 5 grams. Why do I know this? Well, because I have the advent of Google search. But not only that, because my mom used to make this into soups all the time. That kohlrabi marinates so beautifully with all the
Yes.
spices. So it tastes
Yes.
so darn good. And the other point that you made, it's hard to go back to processed foods once you really start enjoying unprocessed foods or minimally processed foods.
Yes.
And I think that's such a huge point because you don't have to struggle while you're eating healthy. You actually enjoy it. And now you do taste all the oil. You do taste all the loads of fat that come with it. You do taste the salt. It's true.
Mhm.
It makes it harder to eat that stuff.
I was going to say, and that could be one of the obstacles for patients to change their diet or to have a lifestyle change of maybe they're worried about how do I cook it in a way that I'm going to enjoy, or maybe calculating all these things and being like, okay, maybe it seems overwhelming to reach this amount and I don't want to be counting fiber or counting protein. And that's become one of my passions, is to really help remove as much of these obstacles for patients as possible. And so when we're really focusing on nutrition, something that I like to do with my patients is to ask them about their food preferences, ask them if there are any restrictions, and I really like to, given their health goals that we're working on, customize recipes for them and put them into a meal plan. And I'll do all the calculations for them. I'll give them the grocery lists. I love being in the kitchen, and so I like to make things really delicious that they'll also enjoy and share these recipes with them. And I think once they have that guidance and all the questions are taken out of it, and the food is hopefully delicious for them as well, I think they're much more likely to turn this into a lifestyle.
We're talking about adding fiber, which is, by the way, my number one tip when everybody asks me about anything about nutrition. I say add fiber. And so, talking about barriers, explain how people should do this slowly, because taking in a lot of fiber cannot be fun, right? If you're not used to it, your gut is not used to it, right?
That's a really good thing to point out. And so we don't want to necessarily go from 15 grams of fiber a day to 50 grams of fiber overnight. We do want to do it gradually. And as we're increasing our fiber intake, we also want to make sure that we're increasing our water intake or having adequate water throughout the day. And so I really like to go with baby steps. Maybe if somebody is at around 15 grams a day, slowly getting them to 20, 25 grams, slowly getting them to 30 grams. It's a slow and steady movement towards a high fiber diet.
I'll tell you what, if you incorporate a lot of fiber quickly, you're also going to have to increase the amount of windows that are cracked open in the house to increase the crosswinds. But there is a payoff in the end if you do it properly.
And absolutely, you say this as an expert. What I tell my patients, because I don't count it like that, I say, you may feel a little bloated,
Yeah,
some gas, and you're not sick. Nothing is going wrong. It's just your gut is waking up. And what you need to do is just take it easy, and your gut will tell you. So have a little bit, take a break for a day, see how you're feeling about this, and then slowly increase, because
absolutely.
people can be scared about it. Also, in the context of dermatology, sometimes patients come in and it's just say they have acne, and we use a medication like doxycycline, or for something else, we'll prescribe doxycycline or other medications that can cause GI upset. If we put it together, that can be a bad combination. So, as practitioners, we should keep that in mind, understand what we're recommending to our patients, so they're not overwhelmed and they're going to make these huge salad that's
Right.
going to be a fiber bomb of 100 grams of fiber, and they're going to really, really hate you the next day and not going to like and stay away from fiber for the rest of their lives. The other benefit of fiber that maybe you can educate us about is how it behaves with other foods, right? Because it also, you mentioned the diabetes diet and how it helped to improve diabetes related outcomes. And
Mhm.
that was because it was paired properly. And I know this is one of your passion. Can you tell us about food pairing and what does that mean? And maybe in the context of fiber and beyond.
So, with regards to fiber, one of the ways that it could be really helpful to certain conditions like diabetes, or we were just talking about acne earlier, is how it could affect our blood glucose levels. And fiber could help slow the digestion of foods. And so they're going to be absorbed into the bloodstream less quickly. And so we're going to have less spikes in our insulin as well. And we know that this could be helpful. There are some studies in acne where we see that a low glycemic diet could help with acne lesion counts. And so having more fiber in the diet could also help decrease the spike of insulin if we're having, maybe something like a starchy carb like bread or pasta. If we're pairing it with fiber, that could help blunt that insulin spike, which we know might also be associated with stimulating other pathways like androgen production that could be involved with sebum production. And so that's one of the mechanisms of how fiber could be helpful and how fiber could be paired. And with that, the order seems to matter as well. So it's not just that we're having fiber alongside a starchy carb, but there's research to show that if we have our high fiber food items first and then our starchy carbs later, that might be the best way to do it. It helps to decrease blood glucose levels and decrease blood insulin levels when we do it in that order. In addition, instead of just the fiber, a similar effect can be seen if we pair a starchy carb with a healthy fat. So maybe something like olive oil or avocado oil that could have a similar effect on glycemic control.
Well, that's actually really interesting because I know we've been talking about fiber, but okay, so going back to Hadar's question then with food pairings, how do you approach this? How do you pair foods in a way that's healthy for you?
Great question. There's several ways to look at this from. So one could be the absorption of nutrients. When we talk about iron, iron could be affected by the other foods that we're having it with. So for example, if we really want to absorb the iron from our meals, avoiding it with things like coffee, tea, or high calcium sources, so dairy products, could be helpful in increasing iron absorption. But then the things to add on with iron that could help increase absorption, especially if it's a plant-based iron, would be things that are higher in vitamin C. So citrus, bell peppers, tomatoes. And also with regards to food pairing, it's important to talk about complete proteins, especially if you are on a vegetarian or a vegan protein. We know that there's 20 different amino acids, and we know that some of them, 9 of them, are essential. This means that our body can't make it itself, and we have to get it from the foods in our diet. And so to make sure that we're getting all our essential amino acids, it's important to bring some mindfulness into the choices that we make. So for example, black beans have all the essential amino acids, but are a little bit inadequate in their levels of methionine. But we know that quinoa is a good source of methionine. And so when we pair our black beans with quinoa, we have a complete protein source.
Jessica, that was awesome putting together all of these different foods, an awesome summary of the different kind of food pairings. Now, are there foods that you tell people to particularly take into if there are certain goals they're going after? Say it's weight management. Do you have people do certain food pairings on purpose? Do you check labs beforehand? What is your approach in this area?
That's a great question. With regards to specific foods, I think it's going to depend on each person and their specific goals. So maybe if somebody is looking to increase their fiber, but also put on more muscle, we'll definitely have more protein in their diet as well. And as we mentioned earlier, I think the most important part of what we'll be recommending to patients is the things that they're actually going to enjoy, the things that they're actually going to be able to adhere to. So I really like to ask them about their dietary preferences and work around their dietary preferences in a way where they can cook something that's going to taste really well or really yummy.
That all sounds really delicious. So, one of the things I'm realizing as we are talking about combining foods is that these practices have been known for generations, right? And I think over the last generation or two, we've lost some of that. We moved out of the kitchen. Nobody's cooking anymore. Kitchens and homes are getting smaller and smaller, especially in the big cities. People order takeout. They don't even know how to operate some of the machinery in the kitchen that they have and just sit there and collect dust. So we don't know how to cook. We forgot about it. So we don't go out shopping for the right stuff that we need. We don't even select it. And so all that skill is lost. But when Raja and I were talking about kohlrabi, for example, we were reminiscing how our moms used to do it and how it was kind of passed from generation to generation within our families. And I think that that's something that is ought to be brought back somehow. I think that's part of the learning that we do culturally. We always talk about the important knowledge that's gathered in various cultures and kind of brought to the medical field. I think part of it is how we cook and prepare food. So just an observation, and I think we can all do better in our homes. Try to do that. Family cooking, family dining together, all that is great outcomes.
I was going to say, even just anecdotally, some patients that have been able to make these lifestyle changes and have been able to spend more time in the kitchen with, cooking more vegetables and being more conscious of what they're eating, they'll come back and they'll say, my children have also been following this now, or, my kids really like
Yes.
this soup and now they ask me to make it for them. And I think it's incredible when one person in the family starts to make a difference, it can really have a positive impact on everybody else.
Absolutely. I mean, now I used to bring one kohlrabi to the dinner table, peel it and eat it just like that. Now I have to bring 3 because everybody wants a bite, So what's going on? It's my kohlrabi. Who's biting into my kohlrabi? What's going on? Anyway, so, but it is absolutely true. You can influence the next
name
generation.
of your next book, Hadar. Who's biting into my kohlrabi? By Hadar Levkov. I love
Fantastic. One of the things we forgot to mention, and I think it's really, really important. I'm going to say something that may sound crazy. But fiber that we talk about is a carbohydrate. Okay? Shh, don't tell anybody. I think one of the things that happened is carbs became such a dirty word. We're not allowed to say it. It's not good to eat carbs. Stay away from carbs. And by doing that, people don't know the distinction. So people, like we talked about, they don't understand necessarily the negative order. What they take is the positive. So they say, stay away from carbs, eat more protein. You can even do high fat diets, right? And so by doing that, they completely neglected their fiber in their diet. If you combine that with the inclination of processed food to remove fiber from our food, you put together this and you realize quickly how it's true what the data shows, what Jessica, how you taught us in the beginning of this podcast, that we are fiber deficient. And so adding fiber to our diet is something we have to do in a cognizant manner. But as we discussed earlier, you can actually make it kind of back to the future. You can actually make this like it used to be before, cook real food, eat real food, and you'll see the benefit.
And there are great choices as well, especially if you have a busy schedule and it's hard to be in the kitchen. Vegetables could be pre-chopped. You could buy lentils pre-steamed. You could buy beets steamed, leafy greens already washed. And so at home, you can toss them all together, have a really delicious salad with whole foods, high in fiber. And I think some instruction around meal prep too could hopefully alleviate some of the obstacles during the week to cook. And it could be simple. Maybe it could be having a healthy grain that's high in fiber. And yes, also a carbohydrate, but maybe something like farro or quinoa cooked and placed in a container on Sunday. And then maybe a mixture of beans prepared on Sunday. And then maybe a source of vegetables that you roast. And then throughout the week, you can mix and match these things and take them to go with you to work. And that way you don't really have to think about it as much. And you have more of a plan for what you're going to be eating.
Foods that are higher in fiber also are pretty versatile in some cases. Like one of the staples of South Indian cooking, which I'm sure if anyone has gone to a South Indian restaurant, they've eaten a dosa. They're these thin, they're basically a crepe, and that's been thinly fried, and it's super crispy, very scrumptious. They're usually made out of rice wheat or sometimes whole wheat, but usually rice wheat kind of flour. And that's been fermented and made into this kind of creamy batter. But you can do the same thing with the other day I did red lentils and soaked them and then made them into a creamy batter and made dosas out of them. And those are way higher in fiber. So incorporating fiber isn't that hard if you really think about it, if you incorporate it in. And Hadar, thanks for pointing it out. Low carb diets means also very little fiber. And there's a huge negative effect to that when you're coming from a health perspective to just take all the fiber out of your diet.
Well, speaking of taking something out, we have to end this podcast. Although we can talk about fiber and healthy diet and pairing foods together forever, I'm sure. As I mentioned in the beginning, my favorite topic to talk about every day, all day. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I had a very sweet time, and that's my dad joke.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode with Dr. Raja and Dr. Hadar. This podcast is brought to you by Learn Skin, leaders in integrative dermatology education. Visit learnskin.com/podcast to explore our many programs or subscribe to the podcast today and never miss an episode. Hey, have a great day and stay curious.